This will be our final geometry lesson, other than some review that we will be doing over the next few weeks. So just going back over what we learned yesterday when it comes to finding the volume of a cylinder, just like all the other volume formulas, we're going to start with finding the area of the base, and in this case is a circle. So we have to use pi r squared, and then we multiply it by the height of the shape. So be sure that you're following along on your notes, and if I go too fast once again, just pause it, rewind it, slow it down, watch it as many times as you need to so you understand this process. So when we're going through volume of cylinders, then we have to think about anytime we're doing volume that we're going to find the area of whatever the base shape is. Since it is a cylinder, then we have circles. Well, in order to find the area of a circle, that's a little different than what we normally do, so I have to remember that that is pi r squared, where I have a specific number that we use for pi. The floating dot means multiplication, and r stands for radius. And that radius, then it has to be squared. So that would look like r times r. So when I plug all of that in, then once again, I like to set my formula for the area of a circle off by itself, so I know I'm finding the base area first before I turn around and multiply it by the height of the overall cylinder. Now, we're going to be using 3.14159 in sixth grade for pi, but on these different problems, we're going to be looking at different decimal positions, just as a hopefully quick review. So we're going to actually take a look at the 10,000ths position here. So when we're using pi, we're going to have it rounded to the nearest 10,000ths position. That's the fourth decimal position out. So once again, going to the decimal and thinking about place values, the first one is a tenth, then hundredth, then thousandths. And that's usually where we've stopped, but we have to continue to understand that it goes 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and then millionths. So if I'm going to round pi to the nearest 10,000ths, then I have to look at my 100,000ths to be my indicator. What does the 9 tell me to do to the 5? Well, it tells me to round up. So in this particular problem, we're going to use 3.1416 for pi. When I'm doing that, then I'm going to plug in all the information that I know. So when I have my formula inside the parentheses, pi r squared, then I know that my radius is going to be 3. For pi, I'm going to use 3.1416. In this math problem, my height is 4. So when I start at filling in my information, my radius is 3 squared, and then I use the 3.146 times 3 squared. That gives me my area of my circle. Then I multiply by the height of 4. I have to start with my exponents, my order of operations, inside of my parentheses, and 3 times 3 is 9. So then I bring everything else down. Once again, when I have multiple step math problems, the best thing that you can do is take the time to rebuild your math problem each and every time. That eliminates a lot of mistakes. Now I'm going to take my parentheses and I'm going to do that math. So I have 3.1416 times 9. 9 times 6 is 54. Put down my 4, carry my addition of 5. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 5 is 14. Put down my 4, carry my addition of 1. 9 times 4 is 36 plus 1 is 37. Put down my 7, carry my addition of 3. And 9 times 1 plus 3 is going to be 12, carry my addition of 1. Then I'm left with 9 times 3, which is 27, plus 1, which is 28. Once again, I multiply the decimal numbers, so I have to count my decimal spaces in my math problem, and there are 4 of them. So I have to move my decimal point from right to left a total of 4 times. What that tells me is that's not my answer, but that is the area of my base circle. So I have 28.2744, 28 and 2,744 10,000ths multiplied by 4. So with my new equation, now I'm going to multiply by 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. Put down my 6, carry my addition of 1. 4 times 4 is 16 plus 1 is 17. Put down my 7, carry my addition of 1. 4 times 7 is 28 plus 1 is 29. Put down my 9, carry my addition of 2. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 2 is 10. Put down my 0, carry my addition of 1. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 1 is 33. Put down my 3, carry my addition of 3, and 4 times 8 4 times 2, excuse me, is 8 plus 3 is 11. Once again, I multiplied a decimal number by a whole number, so I have to still count my decimal spaces. Once again, it's not decimal points because there's only one decimal point, and that would really be a wonky answer. Since there are 4 decimal spaces, I move my decimal from right to left a total of 4 times. Now, as I'm looking at the directions down at the bottom, once again, we're going to round to our nearest thousandths position. So once again, which one is my thousandths position? Well, I have to remember the order of my decimal positions, and my thousandths position is always my third one out. So if I'm looking at my 7, my indicator is always to my right. That's a 6. My rounding rules, 0 to 4 stays the same. 5 through 9 tells me to round up, so my 7 has to become an 8. Everything in front of it will stay the same. Everything behind it, if it was a whole number, would become zeros, but since it's a decimal, it simply drops off. So we end up with 113 and 98 thousandths. But what's my label? Well, I have centimeters and its volume, so I'm going to cube it. All right, let's look at the next one. On your second one, now, as I said, we're going to be looking at different decimal positions for pi. So instead of 3.14159 for pi, we're just going to round it to the nearest tenth. So when my tenth is my first decimal position, my hundredth is behind it. 0 to 4 tells me to stay the same. So for pi on this problem, we're just going to use 3.1. When I plug that information in and what I know, well, then I can't get very far because it's supposed to be pi times r squared. But I don't know what my r is because that is my diameter because it's showing all the way across. So once again, if I'm given a diameter to find my radius, all I have to do is divide that diameter by 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I know in this problem, my radius that I need to use in my math problem is the 4. So now I can plug in my information. I know we're going to have pi times r squared, or 4 squared, times the height. And then my height is 11 in this one, so I'm going to use 3.1 times 4 squared, all in parentheses, so I do my area of my circle first, multiply by 11. Well, 4 times 4 is 16, so now I'm going to have 3.1 times 16, then I'll multiply it by 11. So 3.1 times 16, I start with my 6. 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 times 3 is 18. My second number tells me to bring down a 0, and then when I multiply by a 1, then it's just going to be those numbers in the same order. So I have 1 times 1, which is 1, and 1 times 3, which is 3, and now I can add those together. 6 and nothing is 6, 8 and 1 is 9, 1 and 3 is 4. Then I count my decimal spaces, and I see that I have 1. So I'm going to move my decimal point from right to left 1 time. Now am I done? I'm not done, because all I did was find the area of my base, which is the circle. So now I have to multiply that by 11. When I multiply 49.6 times 11, then once again I get to multiply by 1, which makes my life easier. I'm just going to put in order the 496. Then I can see that I have a second one. So my second number tells me to bring down a 0. And then I put those in order once again as 496. Making sure everything's lined up in the correct columns. Then I can add those together. 6 and 0 is 6. 9 and 6 is 15. Carry my addition of 1. 9 and 1 is 10 plus 4 is 14. Carry my addition of 1. 4 and 1 is 5. I look at my math problem. There's a decimal in it, so I count my decimal spaces, which once again there is 1. So I have to move it 1 time. The directions tell me I'm going to be rounding to the nearest tenth, and my math answer is already to my nearest tenth, so I know that my answer is good at 545 and 6 tenths. But what is my label? So we have millimeters, and since it's volume, it is going to be cubed. So what about word problems? It doesn't matter. The math is still the same. I just make sure that I do all the steps that the word problem tells me. Now notice in the directions, it says we're going to use 3.14 for pi, and we're going to take our answer and round it to the nearest hundredth. So here's our word problem. Linguini is trying a new recipe of his dad's. He wants to cook it in his special pot, though the recipe makes a small amount and only fills a quarter of his pot. If his special cooking pot is 15 inches high and 20 inches across, what is the volume of the pot that will be filled? So let's mark it up, right? Let's cube it so we know exactly what we're asked to do. And notice we got a math term in here that we need to define. So we have a quarter. And once again, if you don't know, then a quarter is 1/4 when it comes to a fraction. I had somebody ask me why we call it a quarter a couple weeks ago. So just to review that, if I think about the quarter, the coin in the American currency, that is worth 25 cents. It's called a quarter because if I have 4 of them, one of them, 25 cents out of 100 cents for the dollar, if I reduce that, makes 1/4. So it's called a quarter. Our quarter, it is 1/4 of 100. All right, so we need to use that information. We need to use that it is 15 inches high. So when I look at that pot, I mark my height as 15 inches. And then it says it is 20 inches across. So all the way, that would be a diameter since it is a cylinder, right? So what is the volume of that pot that's going to be filled? All right, so my information that I need to use. I know volume of a cylinder is equal to pi r squared and then multiplied by the height, but that's my diameter, right? So I can't use my diameter. So once again, I have to take my diameter, divide it by 2 in order to find my radius. So in this case, I have 20 divided by 2, which is equal to 10. So my radius is equal to 10, and then I plug that in for my math problem. I'm going to have pi times r squared, or 10 squared times height, and my height is 15. All right, so now I build my entire formula. Once again, we're using 3.14 for this math problem, and I'm going to multiply it by 10 squared because we found our radius is 10, and then I'm going to multiply it by the height of 15. So I start with my exponent since it's inside the parentheses. 10 times 10 is 100. I have 3.14 times 100. So going all the way back to when we multiplied by decimals, we had a quick lesson on multiplying by a 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. That's easy because the numbers will stay the same. But however many zeros there are in my number that I'm multiplying by, there's a 1 in front, then that's how many times I'm going to move the decimal, right? Meaning that I'm multiplying, so my decimal has to move to the right because it's going to make it bigger. Since it's a 1, I know that my digits are going to stay as 3, 1, 4. I count my zeros that I'm multiplying by, and there are 2, so that just tells me, hey, move my decimal 2 times to the right. Now, if you want to set that up as 3.14 times 100 in a stacked multiplication problem, and you do the math, you're going to still find out that it's going to be equal to 314. And then I have 314 times the height, which is 15. So when I do my last step, I have 314 times 15. I start with my 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Put down my 0, carry my addition of 2. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 2 is 7. And then 5 times 3 is 15. My second number tells me to bring down a 0. And then I'm multiplying 1 by 314. So that's just going to be the 314, making sure everything lines up in its columns. And now that I have my two products, I can add them together. So I have, starting at the right, zeros. 7 and 4 is 11. Put down my 1, carry my addition of 1. 5, 1, and 1 is 7. 3 and 1 is 4. Do I have any decimal positions? I don't, but it tells me to round to the nearest hundredth. I don't need to. My answer is just simply going to be 4,710. And then when I look at my measurements, I know it's inches, so it's going to be cubic inches. So applying the same process, the same math into my word problems is all I need to do. But once again, I want to strongly suggest that you cube it up so you know exactly what is being said and asked of you. All right, so that is our last geometry lesson, other than some review that we'll do over the next couple of weeks. So for your day 2 assignment, you have 7 questions. Make sure you're looking at the directions on which decimal positions to use for your answers as well as for pi. Please ask questions if you have them.